So for today's episode of Freaky Friday, we're going to be talking about Juliane Koepcke, the girl who fell from the sky. Imagine you're a 17-year-old girl, your plane crashes in the Peruvian rainforest, you literally fall 2 miles to the ground. It's truly astonishing what the human body can go through and overcome. So Juliane Koepcke was born in Lima, Peru, October 10th, 1954. And she was the only child of German zoologists Maria and Hans Wilhelm Koepcke. Her parents had the coolest job in the world. They were working for the Museum of Natural History in Peru, hence why she was born in Lima. Juliane was actually homeschooled, and when she was 14, she left Lima to go establish the Paranguana Research Station in the Amazon rainforest with her parents. And because of this unique upbringing, she had a different type of education, so she learned different survival skills and biological knowledge. And most kids her age probably weren't even interested in those types of things anyways. All right, so let's fast forward into the future. The day is now December 24th, 1971, and it was the day after Juliane had graduated, so she's 17 years of age. During this time, it's holiday season, and Juliane and her mom Maria were kind of discussing going back and forth about attending the graduation and when, like logistically speaking, when they want to fly and whatnot. But because it was like holiday season, all the flights were kind of already booked and busy. So Juliane and her mother Maria board the Lanza flight 508. And this particular airline already had some safety complaints along those lines, so it was kind of iffy. And Juliane's dad and the husband of Maria, Hans Wilhelm, he was kind of urging them not to go. You know, he knew the reputation of the airline, and the weather was not looking too cute. There was just a lot of red flags kind of happening, you know? So now Juliane, her mother, and 90 other passengers are 10,000 feet in the air. And like we just talked about, the weather was looking pretty gnarly, but the pilots and the flight crew just continued on their way. Again, it's holiday season, it's super busy, and they just really wanted to make that flight. 10 minutes into the flight, that things were just not right, especially when they were seeing lightning everywhere. The plane was going up and down. It was very heavy turbulence. Juliane had said that Christmas presents and gifts were all falling from the cabin and flying around. People on the flight were praying, when before you know it, the plane was struck by lightning. She said that she just held her mother's hands and that they were too afraid to speak. Juliane said her mom then turned to her and said calmly, "That is the end. It's all over." And unfortunately, that was the last words that she ever heard from her mother. And then she lost consciousness. At this point, the plane had broken apart, nearly disintegrated, completely shattered basically, and she was in a free-for-all. She came back into consciousness and realized that she's falling from the sky. She said all she could remember is that she was strapped to her seat as she was falling and she could feel the wind whipping past her, and that was the only noise that she could hear. And then she lost consciousness a second time. So she remained in and out of consciousness for about 19 hours until she fully woke up and she kind of came to her realization. She's still in the seat and she's like, I just survived an air crash. So during this initial crash period, she was crawling on all fours, looking around for her glasses anywhere she could find them. She was wearing a short white mini dress and only had one sandal. She tried calling out to her mom, but to no avail. She knew she was completely alone. And at this point, she was kind of getting up and trying to examine what type of injury she had, just kind of feeling what hurts. Surprisingly, she didn't have any serious injury. She did have a broken collarbone and a deep gash in her leg, as well as a ruptured ligament in her knee, but she was still able to walk. And for her, the rainforest wasn't this green hell that people had described it to her before. So she felt pretty good about the survival skills that she knew and what she knew about the rainforest and the creatures that lived in it. Also, though, she was nearsighted and she lost her glasses, so she couldn't really see that well. You guys, I just looked up like the dangerous animals that could be found in the Peruvian rainforest. So many scaries, okay? We have jaguars, venomous snakes, centipedes. A personal scary for me is they have a wasp, a big wasp. They got the black caiman. I mean, the list goes on. Very scary. She was smart enough, though, to freaking use her shoe, to use her sandal. She would toss it in front of her to try to scare away any of the venomous snakes or any of the other creepy critters that could be lurking around her, to just try to safely get through the forest, you know? And unbeknownst to her, 14 other passengers did survive the initial crash. But Juliane ended up being the only sole survivor of the entire 92 passenger flight. So the only thing that Juliane was actually able to recover from the crash site were these little chocolates, and she did eat a good amount, but she did try to save some for later. So that was kind of all she was eating. I mean, she knew that a lot of plants there were going to be poisonous and toxic to humans. She didn't have any tools for fishing, and it was the rainy season, so she couldn't pick any fruit. Like, you know, those types of things were really limiting for her. She could hear that there was other planes overhead probably looking for the crash site, but she's covered by a dense canopy of a rainforest, you know? So her goal was to try to find a clearing so that way she could be identified and rescued. The The more I learn about this story, I'm just like so impressed by this girl. I mean, she knew the call of like, I think it was like a king vulture. We all know what vultures do. They're scavengers, right? So she followed the vulture and she actually found another part of the crash site. And these people actually were 2 feet under the ground. They must have like hit head on something crazy, you know? And she was really disturbed by that. I mean, she was definitely disturbed by that. As crazy as it is, she wanted to make sure that none of these passengers were actually her mom. She saw that some of these guys were guys, you know, but there was one female passenger, so she kind of like kicked off her shoe to see the foot because she knew her mom didn't like to wear nail polish. So she knew that that wasn't her mom. Interestingly enough, Juliane did have a watch on her, so she was able to tell time and keep track of her days and everything. But eventually, the watch did stop. I think it was on December 28th it stopped, and then she tried to keep count, but of course, it's like she has bigger things going on than keeping track of the days. You know, she's trying to survive out here and try to find rescue. I'm telling you, this girl is brilliant. She even had a botfly infestation and she had maggots in her arm. Her head was pounding with hunger and she was so thirsty, but she was actually drinking water off of the leaves and just really trying to utilize every survival skill that she's been taught by her parents and everything that she's learned throughout her life. So she was bushwhacking it though. She was going over logs, trees, jumping, crawling, everything. You know what I mean? She was just trying to get through it, and she finally found like a little trickling little creek, right? And she got some water. She was able to drink some. Juliane was taught that if she used this creek as a guide, that she could eventually run into human civilization, potentially. But that's what ended up happening. She followed the creek and the creek turned into a stream, and then she was doing her best to wade the waters. I mean, like we said, there's black caiman, there's all types of, there's piranhas, I think, too. Oh my gosh, I'd be so scared. I'm sure she was too, but she, you know, she was really brave and courageous for all this. So after 9 days of this grueling trek trying to find rescue, she finds like a little encampment where it looks like local fishermen had set up their little station. Nobody was there, but she did find some things to help kind of give herself little first aid, you know. So she poured gasoline on her arm to get rid of like the maggots and the botfly and everything like that. I mean, she's tough as nails for that, and just for having that knowledge and knowing that this is what she needs to do. She heard the call of a hoatzin. I don't know. Apparently, it's like some subtropical bird that likes to nest near open bodies of water. And remember, she's following this creek and da 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 da. So, along with the severe insect bite, she also had really bad sunburn. I want to say it was like 2nd-degree burns from the sun. She was bloodied from it, and it was pretty gnarly. One of the water critters that Juliane was also really worried about were big, giant stingrays. And we all know how those killed one of our heroes. So she saw it coming. Honestly, like, Juliane has some foresight right there because she knew the dangers of a stingray before we all knew. So when she was finally able to get herself to the little community, she tried to communicate the best as she could in Spanish and let them know what happened. She was transported to a hospital where she had a really emotional reunion with her father. She said in which words cannot describe. But that is the incredible story of Juliane Koepcke. Personally, for me, I'm scared of heights, so I've already would have been gone. I wouldn't have even landed. And she was able to transport herself to find civilization. She was literally able to find inhabitants in the jungle by herself, where then she was rescued and sent to a hospital. Can you believe that? She rescued herself. Nobody rescued her, okay? And the total days that she was in the rainforest was 11. Can you imagine that? Juliane goes on to tell her story as the girl that fell from the sky. She's an incredible biologist. She's a mammologist. She studies bats. She's an author, a spokesperson, and an icon. She is the moment. I mean, this is just one of the most fascinating stories. It really shows the willpower of people and the will to live and the courage that it takes to survive such an ordeal. I'll be forever impressed by Miss Juliane Koepcke. I mean, that is quite a feat for anybody, let alone a 17-year-old. Remember, she was the sole survival. She was the final girl. She lived that. I encourage you to hear her own personal testimonials to this and to watch her documentary. There's so many articles and information out there that tell this story so much better than I probably could. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of Freaky Friday. And until next time, bye guys.